Good morning. Our city had a tragic, challenging evening last night. There were 3 separate incidents involving IMPD officers that ended in tragedy. I want to speak this morning as each one of them. Before I begin, however, I want to be clear that each of these incidents will be investigated thoroughly through standard department procedures, including prosecutorial and civil reviews that take place after any use of force incident. I also want to say that we have long talked about the kind of police department we want to be, one that serves with the community and does not police at it. Police department that is trusted and one that every resident feels comfortable calling for help. We made significant investments of both resources and energy to build these bridges of trust and develop the types of relationships with our neighbors that make our community safer. I recognize and am saddened that this mutual trust we so value has been eroded over the last 24 hours. But I remain steadfast in my commitment to be transparent with our community, not just today, but throughout the entire process as we learn more about what happened last night.
I'm going to go over the incidents that occurred in the 6200 block of Michigan Road last night, providing a brief summary of facts as we know them at this particular time. Please know that the investigation is still ongoing. Some of the evidence has not been processed, and the facts and circumstances could change as we move forward. On May 6, 2020, at approximately 6 p.m., Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department Deputy Chief Kendall Adams was traveling northbound on Interstate 65 at West 30th Street when he observed a vehicle described as a gray Toyota with 4 doors driving recklessly. The vehicle had almost struck other vehicles while it exited the interstate. Deputy Chief Adams was in full police uniform and in an unmarked police vehicle. Chief Randall Taylor was in a separate vehicle directly behind Deputy Chief Adams. Deputy Chief Adams asked for assistance as he began a vehicle pursuit. Chief Taylor continued to assist Deputy Chief Adams as the vehicle drove at a high rate of speed, disobeying traffic laws. As marked Northwest District officers arrived to join in the pursuit, Chief Taylor and Deputy Chief Adams removed themselves from the pursuit as is standard procedure per our general order. At 6:10 p.m., the pursuit was terminated by a sergeant on Northwest District who was monitoring the pursuit. Officers immediately backed away and vehicles disengaged from that vehicle pursuit and turned off their emergency equipment. Just before 6:16 p.m., a Northwest District officer observed the same gray Toyota Corolla pull into the rear of a business located in the 6200 block of North Michigan Road. The driver jumped from the vehicle that he had originally been fleeing in, and despite officers' verbal commands, ran from the officer, and a short foot pursuit proceeded east across Michigan Road. Initial information indicates that the officer deployed his taser, which appeared to be ineffective, and an exchange of gunfire between the officer and the suspect followed. The suspect, the driver of the vehicle, was struck by the gunfire. No officer was hurt in the exchange. The driver involved in this case was pronounced deceased on the scene. A loaded gun was found and recovered belonging to the deceased person. Additionally, ballistic evidence recovered from the scene initially indicates that shots were fired from both the officer's weapon and the decedent's weapon. This will all be confirmed as evidence is tested by the Marion County Forensic Services Agency. The IMPD Critical Incident Response Team is handling the criminal investigation, and the Marion County Prosecutor's Office was on the scene as well. Once the criminal investigation is complete, it will be handed off to the Marion County Prosecutor's Office for their review. An internal affairs investigation is also ongoing, and the incident will undergo several other administrative reviews. As the officer is currently marked off on administrative leave as a standard procedure in these type of incidents.
I want to offer a few more thoughts on this tragic incident. Chief Bailey indicated we recovered a gun from the scene that was found with the individual. I know there's been much speculation online that this isn't true. While we continue to process the scene, I believe it's reasonable to believe that this gun was the individual's. It is a distinct looking gun with an orange slide and a elongated grip. We are aware of photos showing the driver holding a similar distinct looking weapon, distinct looking gun on social media sites. We recovered 15 shell casings from 2 guns, and the magazines of both guns show bullets had been fired. It appears the gun found near the individual was fired at least twice. We're also aware of inappropriate comments made by an IMPD detective that was broadcast live on social media during the incident. This comment was made by a detective who was not present at the time of the shooting, but responded to the scene following the shooting. Let me be clear, these comments are unacceptable and unbecoming of our police department. We will be pursuing immediate disciplinary action against that officer. We're also aware of social media speculation around the identity of the officer who made the comments. While that information will be handled through our standard disciplinary process, we can confirm that the detective you see turning off the live video did not make the comment. I also want to provide updates on 2 other events last night. The first was a fatal accident involving an IMPD officer. This officer was on their way into work and appears the individual they struck was in the lane of traffic on an on-ramp in dark clothing with broken streetlight. The officer immediately began performing CPR, but the individual did in fact pass away. This incident is under review. Finally, I want to address the second police action shooting. Just after 1:30 a.m., officers with North District were called to a burglary in progress near 2200 Wood Glen Drive. Upon arrival, 4 officers approached the apartment. As they were approaching the residence, they saw a male outside of the apartment. The male immediately began firing at officers with a rifle. All 4 officers returned fire, striking the male. Once the scene was secured, IEMS arrived, announced the male deceased on scene. No officer was injured during this incident. Our initial investigation indicates that the 911 call may have come from inside the apartment. Our initial investigation also indicates that the deceased individual may have made the call with the intention of initiating an ambush-style attack on the officers when they arrived. In conclusion, last night was a difficult night for our entire community, filled with tragedy. When even one life is lost in our city, it's one too many. I don't have words this morning that will heal the wounds left behind by last night. I won't even try. I know that too many in the community say talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. So that is my commitment to the city. It is my commitment to the mayor this morning. We will act. We will act with transparency. We will act with fairness. We will act with compassion. We will act to live out the oath that we all swore to protect and serve Indianapolis. But as we continue with this investigative process and work to find out what happened, I want to also mention something else that is heard on the Facebook Live video. We hear raw emotion, remorse, sadness, frustration, and anguish. Our officers care about this community and all of its residents. That is why we serve. We're heartbroken at the lives lost last night.
At this time, we will begin taking questions. Once again, if you state your name and outlet in the Q&A box, we will be able to unmute you and allow you to ask questions directly to our IMPD leadership. First question is from Abdul Hakim Shabazz from Indie Politics.
Chief Chris, obviously this is a difficult time for the city, for IMPD. How easy, difficult is it going to be for you folks to go forward with what we've seen that's been pushed out on social media? Because you folks know sometimes the first narrative that gets out, whether rightly or wrongly, is what a lot of the public will believe. So how do you deal with that? Do you plan to bring in state police, maybe do some, corroborate or do some independent investigation? How do you go forward and, restore that community trust?
Well, first of all, I'm going to answer that in a couple different parts. I'm concerned with the things that have been on social media. I think they, in some ways, lack truth as to what occurred. So I can only hope that the community will allow us to do our investigation. It's still early on. But the other part is, I'm not looking to victimize or villainize, I should say, either of these young men who lost their life. I understand their families have feelings, their families have concerns, the community has concerns. These young men were part of the community and have people that they know. I can promise you that we'll run a fair investigation. I'm always willing to listen to family members and their concern. I don't have all the answers right now. I hope to get them as the investigation goes, but I can promise the community that we will be transparent. I hope you understand that I'm one that is willing to acknowledge if we made mistakes here, we will address them. But let's let the investigation run its course before we jump to conclusions, either on our side or on the community side. Investigations need to run their course, and at the end of it, I believe we'll have the truth and the answers that we need to move forward.
Stephanie Wade, WRTV.
Hey, I think the question just people really want answered here, because it is hard to tell from the video and people are forming their own opinions. Was the police officer justified in shooting the suspect, and why? And could this have been avoided?
Well, the investigation is ongoing. We try not to come to those conclusions too quickly. I know what the evidence points to from the scene. And I know what other people are thinking, but at this point, I have no reason to think that the officer didn't act appropriately, but I'm willing to wait and see how that investigation plays out. If the investigation shows that our officer was mistaken in something that they did, then we'll address it that way.
Karen Campbell, WTHR.
Hi, good morning. My question surrounds body cameras. A couple of questions here. One, why doesn't the city have more of these body cameras? And is the city still reviewing the last pilot program? That's a question many people are asking. Why don't officers have body cameras? So where do we go now to start focusing on acquiring the funding to get every officer, or if not every officer, some officers equipped with these body cameras?
I think that we've been clear from the start of the last pilot and for a couple of years now that body cameras are something that our police officers want, that the administration wants. And in the last budget, the city county council and the mayor allocated money to do just that. And that is still our plan. We had never anticipated having body cameras fully implemented on our agency prior to mid or late summer. Anyway, we're a little bit slowed down because of what's going on with the pandemic. Things have just slowed down in all of city government, but our commitment is still to do that. We believe that we have identified the product that we want. I think it's most effective and efficient for our city. We have a draft policy that we utilize during the pilot program. And so we'll continue to work with the controller's office and the purchasing to try to figure out how we can get that done. But we never anticipated having the body camera program fully implemented on IMPD until mid or late summer anyway.
Cameron Riddle, WRTV.
Hi, good morning. Can you talk about protest?
Cameron, we're unable to hear you.
At our set to happen today at noon outside of the city county building. And could you walk us through?
Cameron, it sounds like we're having some challenges with your audio. We can come back to you. Steve Jefferson, WTHR.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, my question centers around the fatal accident involving the pregnant woman. Obviously, in the release, there was information saying that you don't believe that the officer was impaired or anything like that. How is that preliminary conclusion drawn so soon after the accident?
Well, whenever our officers involved in an accident, property damage or otherwise, they're usually given a PBT. So the impairment for that PBT, he I imagine blew a 0-0, which means it's not seeing any sign of alcohol. So we can do that. We've kind of accomplished that really pretty quickly. That investigation is still going on. There could be other things that come to light further down the road, but the initial response is that there's no impairment.
Thank you.
Aaron Cantrell, Fox 59.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My question actually is about the pregnant woman struck as well, kind of a two-parter. What do you want people to keep in mind or pedestrians to keep in mind if they're walking in the middle of the night, and how can they protect themselves? And also, do you have a message to the pregnant woman's family after the loss of their two loved ones?
Well, obviously, it appears that in that area there were some street lights that weren't working, and that's unfortunate. And wearing dark clothes, obviously, we want folks to stay on the sidewalks and cross the streets where there are crosswalks and things that are appropriate, where places where they're appropriate. Sometimes, unfortunately, tragic accidents just happen, and that's what this one appears to be. Our message to the family is that we grieve with them. Our officer, tried to save these lives after this terrible accident occurred, and that our hearts go out with them, and that we'll be talking soon to them to try to provide any words of comfort that we have. But we're sorry for their loss, and we're thinking of them, and we're also thinking of the officer who obviously has to deal with the trauma associated with what happened as well.
Ross McQuaid, Fox 59.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, two questions. One, do we know what the origin was of the gun that was discovered at the incident just off of Michigan Road? And Chief, if you could, because there was a technical glitch, explain for us again what your investigators believe was going on at Wood Glen Apartments and the connection between the phone call and then the gentleman that steps outside his apartment armed with a rifle.
Sure. Let me answer the second question first. So preliminary information that we have on the Woodland is that the call had originated, the original 911 call of the burglary in progress came back to that apartment and ultimately came back to that gentleman's phone. And it appears that could have been an ambush situation on the officers. I believe that has something to do with the way they found the phone as the investigation progressed. The first question about the gun, only thing I'm going to say about that right now is we're pretty sure that's the same gun that Mr. Reed had during some of his social Facebook posts. We believe that gun matches him.
Brian Martin, Indy Star.
Hey, Chief. I have a few questions about the gun in the first shooting. Where was the suspect's gun found at the scene? Do you know if he possessed the gun legally? And have you pulled any nearby surveillance video from the library branch or businesses to determine the sequence of events, such as confirming that the suspect did indeed shoot first at the officer?
Well, the weapon was found near the person's near the person, and the detectives, as they do in every case, will canvass the area looking for video that may help steer their investigation one way or the other. The area where this occurred was in an area that was surrounded by trees with one open side to the north. And if there was cameras, it would have been on that building that's associated just to the north there, which I believe is the public library. But the detective will look at all that video or look for video to corroborate certain things in the investigation, for sure, as they always do.
Matthew Van Tryon, Indy Star.
Is the identity of the pregnant woman who was struck by the officer?
That will be released by the Marion County Coroner's Office once all the proper notifications have been made.
We're going to take two more questions. Jesse Wells from Fox 59.
I think more or less the question has been asked and perhaps answered, but can you confirm whether the gun that Mr. Reed had was reported stolen or not?
I'm not going to confirm that at this point.
Rick Callahan, Associated Press.
This is Rick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify in yesterday's the two fatal shootings. Is there did any of the officers involved have body cams that were rolling that collected any video, or was there any dash cam video of either of the two shootings, the fatal shootings? Wasn't clear.
No, sir. No body camera or dash cam.
Okay.
We're going to go back to Cameron Riddle. Cameron Riddle from WRTV.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my apologies. I muted myself last time. Chief, what can you say to the protesters who are going to be outside of the building you're in right now at the City County building, saying they'll be protesting today at noon? What's your message to them, especially in the middle of this pandemic? But could you walk us through as well with what we're hearing in the video? We hear a number of pops. Can you clarify what's the order? Was he tased first and then he shot and then the officer shot his gun? Can you walk us through that? And do we have an ID on this gentleman yet?
Sure. So as for the protesters, I guess I would tell them, look, I understand where you're coming from. I understand concerns. I would hope that you allow us to run the investigation. Understand that everything that you may see on social media or everything you may hear on social media may not be accurate. That's why we run the investigation. I tend to believe that there's a story out there that's true. I think we're in line with that at this point. Like I said, I am certainly not trying to villainize either of these young men. I don't think it's appropriate. We have some information concerning them, but I'm not going to share that at this point. I think the families are owed respect, and I don't really know that it comes into play. We're looking at these individual events as they occurred, but understand that I'm going to give you the truth, whether we're in the right or the wrong. All I'm asking is that you give me time, give our department time to work those things out. It's not to come up with excuses or shift blames or anything like that. That is really to give you the honest and transparent truth as to what occurred out As for the information on the video, at this point, I couldn't tell you which shots were fired when. I just don't have that information at this time. That will be part of the investigation. The only thing I can tell you is that both weapons were fired, one by the officer and one by Mr. Reed. And then I've already gone across the incident with the comments that were made by one of our detectives. I know that's got a lot of people's ear, and I understand that. I'm heartbroken to hear that any of my officers would make comments like that. The only thing I can promise you there is that we'll be looking into that, and there will be a discipline that comes back.
Ryan Martin, Indy Star.
Chief, do you believe that that ambush style attack was connected in any way to the first shooting, given some of the concerns that were shared last night by members of the public?
Sure. That's a possibility, obviously, but I have no way to confirm that at this point.
Stephanie Wade, WRTV. Stephanie, we're having audio issues. We can't hear you. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next person. Karen Campbell, WTHR.
And look, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So it was mentioned, oh, actually, can you confirm what led to Mr. Reed evading police? What started that pursuit?
When I was going through the opening, there was reckless driving behavior observed by two officers, including Chief Taylor and Deputy Chief Kendall Adams, as they were driving on I-65. High rate of speed driving and almost striking other vehicles on the interstate. That's what drew their attention to him in the first place.
This concludes our press conference. PIOs will be available for follow-up questions following this event. Thank you.
There you hear the police chief of Indianapolis and one of the deputy chiefs as well talking about a recent run of deadly incidents involving police in Indianapolis since yesterday evening through early this morning. 2 deadly shootings, 1 car crash that killed a pregnant woman. They made comments about all of them, some clarifications as well. They feel the second shooting, one happened this morning, may have been an ambush. We'll have more on that as the day progresses. The early one, so far more controversial one, they confirm a few things, that they had found the gun, that it belonged to the man who was eventually killed, and they feel that he did indeed fire it. But the chief also said that the comments made during the aftermath of that shooting by a detective, he says not by the officer,